When you mistake the other as being greater than you, you're making a very grave mistake. Why is that? Well, simply because the self is directly related and connected. I wouldn't even say the self. Presence is directly connected to everything. So, in terms of this eternal self, in order to live in a body, it must learn how to proceed in an environment where its own identity or lack thereof is deeply rooted in a presence beyond space and time. So, in order to find this space or time, we must look into both of these areas. We must look into the lack of space and lack of time. When you run out of space, that's it. There isn't anything to be filled or to fill, and so there is no scale. And when there isn't any scale, the only form of relativity is formed through perception. Perception being the only thing which it could be seen as a coordinate or measurement. A coordinate or a measurement that is set as a fixed anchor among a relation of activities, which, if these relations of activities are focused for long enough in one mode of being, they begin to exert and exist as a solidified state. Being in a solidified state means these instruments are now being used by a presence more permanent than themselves. When they are connected to this presence, it begins to know itself through the being. By recognizing its position within the many relationships which exist within this changing environment, or a movement or flux which exerts itself as a conveyor belt, as a form of conveyor in which the convening vehicle is perceiving a flux or change. Whereabouts thereof, in the whereabouts thereof, there is a form of being that is confirmed through its knowledge and others' knowledge of its relationship within its environment. The fact that minds, which we may consider to be clusters of interrelated activities within the flux of language, which is eternal and non-existent according to our intellect, within the state of knowing, there is an automatic seeing sensation of knowledge, which is a certain type of recognition which allows itself to unfold as the mind recedes in the background. As the mind recedes in the background, the knowledge of all self begins to receive its influence upon the environment. As such, its influence is forgotten due to the recognition between a perceived self and what is now seen as an outer self. Thus, the one perceived is the one judged, and the one judged is the one who doesn't know, and thus they realize they are something other than the other self, eternal self, true self, wonderful self, gracious self, knowing self, other than me. So who is the knowing self other than me? I am not that. I am the eternal knower of all things. Where I stand is in a place beyond my home. I feel the influence of everything around me as it is within me. My platform is one of knowledge. My stasis is one of homeostasis. I play with form. I recognize interrelationship. I find the beauty in all things. I see the self in all things. I recognize lessons when they are to be had by a being like me or other than me. I recognize the lessons. I learn of the challenges. Challenges to learning are very difficult because when you're facing a challenge, you will never know how to respond to it. No matter what you think or try or do, you will never know how to respond, but something within you will know. The thing within you that knows is not what you usually perceive it to be. I must always start with this statement because in order to understand that you are not what you think you are, I will help you remember that what you are is something very different to what is commonly known by society or accepted by the mainstream media. So, if you were to look at the mainstream media, you would likely find that its own influences are ones based upon principles of violence and hatred. When you look at principles of violence and hatred, you find that most of them don't have any sound foundation. Their foundation is flawed and it's unrecognized by the public as being what it really is, which is flawed, as being an unreconcilable, unresolvable influence of injustice upon the people. When you look at the people, you see that their injustice is one they cannot have fruits of, because the fruits of their injustice are feeding a separate mind. They're feeding the mind of populations. They're feeding the mind of governments, media, corporations. These influences are ones which we must be very discerning in regards to our approach towards them. Our approach towards them must be one of inter-regard. So it's not quite regard, it's an internal form of regard, which involves knowing where they are, but not necessarily engaging with them on an external level. So our internal regard with these influences is one where we know that we must not engage, and as such we are able to know already where they are. And we don't need to have any influence of willpower or control or knowledge of the mind, intellect, to try to interpret or interact with these influences. Because really the influences that we perceive them to be are only threats to our sense of self. Threats to the physical self, which genuinely has fears and rational fears to preserve its own identity. This is a fair criticism one may have of what we are experiencing. However, we must be able to follow something that comes from a place deep beyond and beneath what we commonly perceive to be our intellect. If we base our foundation and our rationality upon simply intellectual temporary scripts, if we keep doing this, we're going to fail. And if we fail, basically the sense of self we were protecting will be destroyed and the greater self will not be allowed to come through. We need to keep in mind that although we don't have full control over the outcome of things, we can see that we have time. We have time. We are working with a presence that is in a physical world which is temporary, while we, in terms of what we actually work with, we are working with a presence that is beyond the physical universe, working through the physical universe, within the physical universe. But how can it be within while being beyond? It's anchored in something that is not affected or influenced by the changing flux of the world. It doesn't respond unless it is triggered by a greater need, a deeper need of the soul, a deeper need of the soul, which leads it into the second process. The second process is one which people usually do not know much about, especially because it leads them beyond their intellect. As such a process must be based on a form of trust or certainty, not from the intellect. If you were to look at this with clear eyes, you would see that it would be a great blessing to not be bound by your intellect. You will find that such a thing will not only promote happiness and prosperity, but would also deprive you of the very bounds you have on your foundation in the physical universe, or world as you perceive it. Because you see that you come from a place beyond this planet. Could be another planet, could simply be the spiritual reality. So knowing this, don't base your faith in something that only temporarily affects you. Your voice can emanate very far if you let it. If you tend to listen within, the boundaries you had created can now be directly dissipated by you. You have to penetrate the foundation of reality to get to this. And really, what greater gift is there? Going deep into the foundation of reality. There may seem to be a scary process undergoing your awareness. But don't let this scare you. It's all good. It's all goodness in the arms of God. And when you realize that what you're looking at here is not really what you think it is, it tends to grow on you. For this, you need patience. Patience is very essential here. If you are patient, the waiting game is not too painful. Pain is something most people experience. And knowing pain, you know that if you are not basing your foundation on something temporary, then there is no pain. Because what is pain other than a stick in the road based on your thoughts about where you may be going, or based on something you are trying to remember or hold dear closely to yourself, which is long lost, or may never be found, or will be lost someday. So, why hold on to pain? Whether it's a future that you will never reach, a future you'll never know, or a future you just can't worry about. Where is pain when you are following this? Following the future which you know nothing of. Seeking something which you know nothing of and which you'll never find. So goes for the future. Seeking in the past, seeking in the future. Why seek? When you are here, you are already beyond any source of pain you may have thought could cause you. Yet there is still an aspect of the separate self, which at times may need to leave a timeless state in order to come closer to a self-protective mechanism. If the self-protective mechanism is in place, we are able to work on a level of timing and efficiency. Now no longer working on a level of simple presence. You don't want to be a firecracker, as they say in the wisdom from the greater community teachings of the new message from God. You don't want to be someone who exerts all of their presence in one, experiences a full-blown experience of interrelationship, but then is destroyed. So where is your influence on the deeper concrete mechanics of the world and of the many perceiving individuals within it? Here you may simply blend with the whole, connect others, yes. But really, is this a permanent connection if you are unable to hold it based on knowledge, interrelationship, communication, knowledge and action? You may recognize people, they may recognize you, you may recognize we are one with all, permanent oneness with all, yes. In the end, this is what we want. But if you're one, the one you are, is unable to work with changing circumstances, how will it be permanent and how will it sustain future generations to come? If their God is one which lives beyond humans, never working, it's always out there, somewhere far away, in some lost space, rather than being right here, interacting through the people. The work of the interacting individual is one of service, of God, service for God. So as it serves God, recognizes its position within the universe in an interacting whole. Interacting whole. So as we travel through this interactive whole, we can call it, whether it's a whole or a larger picture, it doesn't matter, but we're traveling through. As we travel through, we will notice that we will be going along a path which will have many branches, many tunnels formed where you may choose to travel through one or the other, or all at once. It is suggested, according to the laws of nature, that according to the great attraction, it will give it the strength to attract itself to the outskirts of its perception through all branches, without a knowledge of destination, because the destination reduces one's possibilities of knowing. One may have reduced their exponential growth and no longer been able to continue. So one must recognize or accept there is an attraction naturally occurring beyond its awareness. Otherwise, this will not bear fruit. To bear fruit, you must listen to something from the infinite. Thank you for listening.